For Q&A right now, so we're going to start out by having all the various parties here introduce themselves, and then I'll talk a little bit about what they do and what they did to create, the X-Wing ships and stuff, and then they'll answer any questions that you have.
Hello, I'm Jay Little. I'm the senior designer who designed the core system for X-Wing.
Hi, I'm James Neffen. I developed Wave 2 and work on additional expansion ships.
I'm Steve Kimball. I'm the producer. I've been on X-Wing since its inception, really, along with Jay.
Is that all you do, is just hang out around since the inception? Look good? I'm Jason Godoin. I'm the senior media producer for Fantasy Flight, and I'm the guy who does the modeling of the plastic ships.
I'm Steve Horvath. I'm the Senior Vice President of Communications. The reason I'm up here is I was the person who made the deal to let us do X-Wing, and I was involved a lot in the early stages of it. Continue to poke my nose in it whenever I can.
Let's be honest, the real reason you're up here is to make sure we don't tell anybody anything we're not supposed to.
Yeah, that too, yeah. Yeah.
So who's going to start? Okay,
You start.
all right. So it was really exciting when I was approached by Christian with the opportunity, Jay, would you like to design a game about X-Wings and TIE fighters shooting? And I'm like, I couldn't say yes fast enough. It was really interesting. In a very short side anecdote, we were looking for a cat, and we were at the shelter. We were wandering around, and the phone in my pocket rings, and I pick it up and answer it and say, hey Jay, guess what? We got the Star Wars license. We're going to be designing this game about X-Wings and TIE fighters. Like, that is awesome. I hang up the phone and I realize that I'm looking at a black cat named Jedi. So we adopted him, and he is strong in the Force, and it's just really interesting. Ever since we got this license, it seems like we cannot design cool enough, fast enough for all these ideas we have, all of this amazing, rich content that there is in the Star Wars license to pursue. And so for the X-Wing game, it was important very, very early on to get an idea and a real good feel for what sort of experience a player would expect when they are flying these ships around in this dogfighting using these amazing ships that they've come to know and love over the years. And the core set has the one X-Wing and the two TIE fighters. So one of the initial focuses is we need a baseline to start our design principles from. And I've told people that a lot of times we had to go back and watch these movies, and what do you see these ships do, and how do they maneuver, and what's a reasonable expectation for firepower, for durability. X-Wings have shields. How are we going to represent that versus just their hull integrity? How important is the ship versus the pilot in the ship? There were always these different things that we wanted to integrate and reflect. So it was interesting, a lot of the decisions that we made early on were how do we make these distinctions between these important elements of a dogfighting game in the setting.
And if you think about it for a second, he said we had to watch the movie several times. So he's been paid to watch Star Wars a lot the past couple of years.
I know, I've got a terrible job. It's so hard. I like to say that it is the hardest work I've ever loved. So there was a lot of research, and then the Star Wars setting is really rich, and it creates these different, very personal experiences for all the different people who watch it and have loved it over the years. But we needed to start somewhere. So out of this huge brainstorming list of all the different possible things that we need to account for and interact with, I decided that to start out with, if the core game is going to focus on one X-Wing and two TIE fighters, how do we make that feel the most dynamic and rewarding for the people? Because you're not receiving just one X-Wing and two TIE fighters for the game. You're receiving three models, but the ships, the cards, the accessories, all the other things that you have in there, you're receiving a huge combination of ways that these elements of Star Wars are going to interact. So we needed a baseline to build from. So I decided that after watching the movies and seeing what we were going to be able to accomplish with this core set, that the baseline was going to start very, very simply, and then we were going to build out from there. If we've got an X-Wing and two TIE fighters, then I want to decide if that's all you ever play with, how should it feel between those two? X-Wing's got better firepower, okay. TIE fighters are fairly fragile, that makes sense, but they're also agile and maybe a little bit harder to hit. We see them making barrel rolls and all of these other maneuvers that the X-Wings can't quite replicate. So taking a look at this, I decided that we're going to start with the premise that at medium range, with a good shot, an X-Wing should be able to take down a TIE fighter in one hit. Because it seemed that the movies reflected that. Now the movies didn't use a range ruler like we include in X-Wing, but after watching it enough, you realize that those TIE fighters are pretty darn fragile. So if that's our baseline, an average pilot in his ship at medium range against an average adversary, a good roll is going to pop. And so we went from there. Okay, that means if we have an extremely skilled pilot, Luke Skywalker, that is a more reasonable assumption. Maybe he doesn't need a great hit to do it. He just needs an average hit to do it. Well, maybe some of the named TIE fighter pilots, it's not just the Academy rookie, but Mithril Maul or these other pilots, okay, they're going to be harder to hit, or they're going to pack a bigger punch than your typical TIE fighter. So it was interesting. We started to take a look at the different personalities and the different things that made these ships interesting and nuanced. But then we also had to make the distinction that at its core, an X-Wing chassis is an X-Wing, is an X-Wing, is an X-Wing. The TIE fighter base model is a TIE fighter. It doesn't matter who you put behind the seat, it's still a TIE fighter. But who you put behind the seat will affect things like what actions can it pull off? What special abilities does it have? How does it interact with the other ships in the field? So once we establish that baseline of average, a pretty good shot and take down a TIE fighter, we had something to build from so that we could start to go above or below that average baseline and start to create these nuances for how individual abilities would work. Now what's really interesting, and some of you may know this, toward the end of the development cycle, I had some very serious health issues and I ended up going into the hospital for several months. And at that point, a great deal of what became the core game was already established, and that's when Steve Kimball and some of the other people of the development team really stepped up and took ownership of this and said, okay, Jay's created this rule set, how do we complete it to be able to apply to the other ships in Wave 1? How do we expand that to make sure that the interaction, the tournament play, which was something that we had to consider from the very beginning, how are we going to cost things, how are we going to create all this? And what's interesting is some of the best ideas and design decisions came after my involvement, so I can't take credit for them. Like for those of you who have played it, the plastic bases, those little notches that are on the bases to make sure that the guidelines match up perfectly, I wish I could take credit for that idea. Steve, was that? Okay. It was brilliant. It's something that I had never considered, but as soon as I saw that, it was one of those going, I wish I would have. But another one, which ended up being one of the really what I think were the cornerstone decisions that added a lot of the depth to the game, was the development of that focus icon. Now originally we had played around with a number of different dice resolution systems to be able to reflect offense and defense and various statistical probabilities and yada yada yada. But we had missed that little extra something that would allow us to differentiate certain pilots, or what I call an X factor, but we've got X-Wings, something that was a nuance that could be interacted with, something that was not just pass-fail like the hits and the evades. And over the development of the tail end of the core set, that's when they came up with the idea for the focus icon. And I really have to give credit to Steve and Adam Sadler and Corey and just all the other people who were involved in that. That focus icon opened up the game to almost limitless possibilities by creating what I call a half result. Because on its own, it doesn't count for anything. But in conjunction with all of these other things that we can include now, the focus action, Luke's special ability where if he's being attacked on defense, he can do something with that focus icon if it comes up in his dice pool. Suddenly the game went from what was a fun, exciting dogfighting experience to one of the things that I think really made it a rich tactical game that had some really interesting moments for the squad builder. It really made building your squadron and decking out your ships to be competitive suddenly much, much more interesting. Because now you have this new resource, this new thing to take into account. Not only what can I do with it, but now what do I need to expect that my opponent might be putting on the field that I'm going to be facing? So I I give a lot of credit to the success of X-Wing to everybody else who worked on it after I did. I was very, very fortunate to get started with this, but this was one of those projects. It was an amazing project to be able to work on, not just because it was the Star Wars license, and it was being able to work on something that, since I've been a kid, I've been in love with, but it was almost the perfect project development process where literally everybody involved, from step one to step million, when it finally went out to the door and got distributed. From the people who worked on the design and development to the 3D modeling, for the production and making sure that we could create the best experience and bang for the buck to the core set, with all the rules revisions, with getting the costing right. Everybody involved in the development of Star Wars contributed significantly to its success. And I think it would really amaze everyone to think of the number of people, while it was still inside the FFG, who were involved, before you even get to the external playtesters. I mean, every department was involved. People from every department were involved, including the logistics of how the warehouse is handling this huge volume of people want to play this game, so how do we get it out to them as easily as possible? The sales team making sure that this was represented and exciting, and that distributors and retailers wanted to carry this product and had an easy time getting their fan base excited, to making sure that our organized play was going to be able to support the phenomenal interest in this game and create a really interesting, engaging, competitive scene. So this game delivers on a lot of different levels. The last thing that I'll say in one of the goals that I had with the core game is, for those of you who have played, you'll notice that there are really 3 different stages of gameplay. There's a quick start set of rules to get you up and running literally within moments of opening the box. Read this first, pop these minis out, take these cards, start your fun. Then there's a deeper experience where you're playing with more and more of the rules, and now you're using the skill icons, and now you're using points to build squadrons. And then there's the competitive play, which takes it a level deeper. And what was really interesting to me is, we knew that we wanted it to work on all 3 levels. So we really had to develop a game system that was going to be robust enough to deliver a solid experience on each level. And so for me, one of the metrics was that for the quick start rules, I wanted a game that was going to be easy enough that my son could play. He was 9 at the time. And Steve's son, Steven, was also one of the players, and your wife as well, I believe, right? We wanted to make sure that anybody who was a fan of Star Wars could play and enjoy this game at the level of their tactical comfort, if you will. I've had a lot of people come up to me and say that they've really enjoyed this and being able to play it with their kids, because the other miniatures games that maybe were a little bit too difficult for their kids to grasp, but that this was a game I was really, really excited when my older son taught my younger son how to play, and I didn't need to step in and teach them. So I'm actually almost as proud, if not prouder, of how we were able to deliver a great introductory experience that appealed to a wide range of people to get them excited about wanting to explore the rest of the game. So that's a lot about the front end and the beginning of the process and some of those key decisions that we had to make. And then after I worked on to other projects, such as the Edge of the Empire role-playing game, the team that we had established to really support and drive the core set, they were able to take over development and make sure that everything else met the expectations that the fans now had from this game that they were falling in love with. And James Niffen here had a lot to do with that and the success of the following sets, to be able to take the wonderful models that Jason and Steve were coordinating with and make sure that they matched the fun people were expecting at the table. James, hopefully you can talk to that, and I didn't just paint you in a corner.
Well, to begin, Wave 2 was my first development project on the game. I came in after the core set was designed. I helped with the QA process, and when I started on Wave 2, the important thing to me was that I grasped the thematic elements of those ships as best as possible. So some people have asked me, like, why is the Millennium Falcon's YT-1300 stats the way it is? And the answer is, I looked at the movies and I looked at how various people interpret these ships in different ways, and tried to find the balance within what the game needed as stats and ships and abilities and whatnot versus what the ships feel like they should do. So like the Millennium Falcon has 1 agility, as you know, and a lot of people say that's too low, but if you watch the movies, it takes just a shot all the time. It doesn't really dodge shots, does it? So thematic element was sort of the driver, and then design balance is where I go after I decide what the ships need to do to represent the IP as best as it possibly can.
What was the most interesting or challenging ship to design?
I would say the A-Wing, actually. The A-Wing is a really difficult ship because it doesn't have a ton of natural firepower, but it has to be extremely fast, and it has to be extremely maneuverable. And it's much more expensive to build in the IP than a TIE fighter. But how does it maintain its power? And so that secondary weapon that it has is sort of what makes it the important thing. It's your one-shot guy. You bring in your TIE Interceptor because you want it to shoot a lot, but if you're the really skilled pilot, the guy who wants that one shot to matter, you bring the A-Wing. And so I tried to make the A-Wing as capable as it could be by giving it all those actions. That was the most enjoyable ship to design. And the Slave One was pretty fun too. Putting the double firing arc, once we thought of that was the game changer. Like, that's what makes it the weird ship. Sure, the YT-1300 has the turret, which is nice, of course. It's fun, but the true test of your skill is when you pop that Fire Spray 31 out, and even if it's just the generic guy and you are blowing away the competition because you know just the right turns to make. You've seen that table and you've said, that's about a 45-degree angle, but I'm not sure. I'll try it anyway. And that your firing arc just perfectly comes into play, and you never miss a shot, even though you don't have a turn. Because in every turn you get to attack, because you are the best player out there. And that Fire Spray 31 is the one that really solidified that pilot skill, player skill combination. Steve, would you like to talk a little bit about your challenges as producer?
So, producer roles really enjoyable for me because I'm able to do so many different things. I'm able to help with the development process when Jay was out, and I'm able to work with the art department, able to work with the licensor directly with LFL. I'm able to work with Jason and sit down and make sure we got the models and the proportions and then the scale, everything else lines up. So it's really fun because I get to dabble in all of these different things. Specifically with the scale, it's been a lot of fun watching Jason. It's almost like got the brain up here, the passion. I love Star Wars. I've seen it since I was a kid. I played with little micro machines, made my own game. Of course, this is much better than anything I've ever done. But I sit there and he has the know-how, and he's figured out how to use this 3D modeling program. I mean, it's fascinating. I wish I could be the one there doing it myself, but I don't need to do that because Jason's perfect for it. It's really been great to have a full team effort on this. I can't be happy with the way it turned out.
That was extremely modest. I don't know if you guys realize this. Actually, he is Star Wars X-Wing. I mean, he oversees all of it. He's talking to the factories. He's talking to LFL, talking to me. He sees things that no one else sees. He lives, eats, sleeps, and dreams Star Wars. So he's extremely modest, but this guy right here is what pulls it all together. It's pretty awesome. And that is the best part, too. I often say this, people come by my desk, and they look at, well, first of all, I've got this desk that you would all love to see right now. I've got several ships that you're not going to see for a little while yet, in various states on my desk and my computer, that the 8-year-old me, inside, watching, Empire Strikes Back in, 80, 81, little kid at the drive-in, if he knew where 38-year-old me was, he'd be very, very happy. It's living the dream. I think all of us feel that way, but, each person has their piece to add to this puzzle, as we're talking about. We talk with the license very closely, designers, people in marketing, people put together deals, people that are working in the role-playing game, people that are in the art department, all have input, all have ideas. They'll stop by and talk to you, and it's everyone working together making this cool. I am the guy that runs the program that makes the plastic. So in a way, that's pretty sweet. But I could not do that without these people here. They're the ones that see the things that I don't see. They're the ones that are able to give me backstory to things I don't understand. I'm working on ships that I've never seen before. You've got the multi-pro. I've only seen the movies. I haven't played the video games. I haven't read the books. I don't know the rich, intricate backstories that really inform why these ships are the way they are and what things on the ships do sometimes. Okay, I see a bit or a bob, and I'm like, oh, well, what is this? And then Steve says, well, actually, this is a laser cannon, and he starts reeling off details. And I'm impressed. I'm like, okay, how do I work that through the plastic and make sure this shows up, make sure that everyone who's into it way more than I am isn't let down by my lack of knowledge. So people like Steve, lack of knowledge. That's what I have, a lack of knowledge. I'm learning though, I love it, so I'm learning. I contribute the lack of knowledge. I do a great job at it too, let me tell you. I'm worth every penny. The hardest ship design, each one's harder than the last, but easier. It's weird, I started working in 3D, working in the Midnight Chronicles movie that Fantasy Flight did years ago. You might have seen it, it's a fantasy movie. But that's how I got into Fantasy Flight games. I'm not a hardcore gamer. I haven't been playing games for years. I've loved Star Wars for years. I play games. My family is a Monopoly, Uno kind of family. That's what we're comfortable with. And I didn't even know Fantasy Flight existed. So I came into it kind of not knowing. And I just started plugging myself in, learned 3D, started doing that. And eventually got to the point where we were having Star Wars models done by a partner of ours. And it wasn't fast enough. We just needed faster production more because people were chomping at the bit to see more ships. When we knew we were still chomping at the bit, we were doing our best to make everything faster. And part of that was Christian came to me and said, hey, I want you to make ships. Can you do this? I said, sure. Why not? I would love to. And I thought, I'll get some ships I've ever seen from Expanded Universe, things like that. And they're like, well, no, the Millennium Falcon needs you right now. And if I could pick one ship to do it for just one in my entire life, I would choose the Millennium Falcon. Like I know that ship, it's beautiful, it's iconic for movies, and they said, do it. And learn the program and do the most iconic ship in Star Wars. And don't mess up.
You did a great job. I think we can all admit that it looks phenomenal. We actually sat down and went over to the source material because there are two different models that were used, right? There was a New Hope and then they changed it for Empire. And we had to look and say, okay, what do we want to show here? We need the clamps on the front to match. We need the little divots in the back to match. What are we going to do with the rear engine, right? A lot of people have been asking about that. Why isn't it blue? Well, we didn't paint red and pink on the back of the X-Wing and the Y. We don't have lights there. So we had to sit down and figure out not just the modeling aspect, but the paint. Where's the paint going to go? How are they going to apply it? What happens once the wash is on there? We got to go lighter color because once the wash is on there, it's all darker. There's so many different things that actually start here with the model.
So the only other two things that I'll add is that one of the things that I get back that I really love is when people say, yeah, I feel like I'm in the cockpit, and all of these games that have sound effects going on, they're humming the music to themselves, and they're going, and they really get into it. But I think one of the things that we're all extremely proud of is right now, these are the best detailed and most accurate ships at this scale available, period. And we've gotten feedback from LFL along those same lines. They've been as impressed with this as we have. I think that's the highest praise we can think of for all the work that's gone into our project. So at this point, we will be taking some questions. If you have specific rules questions, I would ask if you hold those to the end, and then those of us involved in the rules side can help answer those, rather than some of the production or other higher issue questions that you might have. So, yes.
Why did you choose the Moldy Crow versus all the other EU ships? Really the first one.
The question is, why the Moldy Crow versus so many other ships in the series? And Steve, you can talk to that.
Why not the Moldy Crow? No, that is a very good question. There was a lot of speculation as to what the fourth ship would be. Well, from a design aspect, we wanted a support ship, right, alongside what the shuttle would do. So that, from the game design aspect, we also took into account the size, and we wanted something that would make sense along with the supportability that James was designing. That was one reason. And the second, it's a personal favorite of mine. If I can infuse some, personal bias into the project, I played all of those games, every single one of them. I was Kyle Katarn. I was sitting next to Jan Ors in the Moldy Crow. I flew it, I crashed and burned it, got the Raven's Claw after, you know, I've done all of that. And it just made sense that we had a ship that was parallel enough, that fit, that was rebel, you know, but also allowed us to infuse more game elements like the turret that it has. That's also something that just made sense, right? It just fit in with what we wanted to do game-wise. So.
Great question. Anyone else? Yes, okay. But I'm assuming that the answer is going to be something like, that is a great question, stay tuned to our website for more details.
That's pretty close. There's more ships to come. I can't tell you how many, but as he commented, there's all these ships out here. I mean, we're just getting started.
So,
he's got some ships sitting on his desk right now that would explode your head.
So the answer is more on the way, and you know what ships we haven't done yet, so let your imagination wander. Yes?
Do we have a tour of his desk?
Maybe have a tour of his desk. How much money do you have on you? No. Nice shot.
Along with all of those other ships that are coming out, are you considering other factions as well, like a pirate faction?
So that's a great question. Are we considering other factions? And that would kind of also just go under for either tournament or casual play. How many different sides are there? How many different players? What I can tell you is right now, the game field, both for the tournament scene and the casual scene, is set up perfectly because a lot of the iconic confrontations in the game between rebels and the as other factions, again, that would be something about future products and development that we can't answer.
Jay, I want to add something to that too. From the tournament point of view, it's one of my teams works on the tournament play. Like we're having the regionals here today. Much like Jay said, his goal was in the original design of the game was to have different play experiences at different play levels. You can play the game with your kids in a very casual manner. You can also play in regional and world championships. We still have more ways to play the game, more interesting things coming out of organized play that we're still developing and we haven't seen yet. But our goal with this game was to be able to enjoy it at home or in stores or in different ways at different levels all the way through. So people that are just learning the game, there can be some kind of competitive or very casual formats that they can play with people, as well as getting up to the highest levels of regional and world championship type stuff. And there's some more interesting wrinkles that I think I can't talk about today, but kind of tie in with some of the stuff on this deck.
That's a great point because the design of this actually shared something in common with the design of Edge of the Empire, where we can't just think short term. We're not just designing something for right now. We weren't just designing the core set. We were designing an underlying system and framework that could support not only 3 levels of play, but also the vast array of different starships. We couldn't paint ourselves in reports, so we already had to anticipate during the core set, what are we going to have in the rest of Wave 1? How is Wave 2 going to impact the game? How do we balance the thematic needs of delivering a Star Wars experience with the mechanical and functional needs of creating a balanced competitive tournament scene? If we had released Slave 1 during Wave 2 but not the Millennium Falcon, that would have an impact on those 3 levels of play. So also it makes a lot of sense thematically to have the Falcon and Slave 1 come at the same time because of the confrontation interaction. So, I mean, we don't make any of these decisions lightly. And I think one thing people would be surprised at is how far out we have to account for. The decisions that we make now are going to resound for years to come in some cases.
Which gets back to your question about why the Moldy Crow, right? We talked about where Slave 1 and Millennium Falcon make sense to release together from a competitive point of view and just for a game balance point of view. We needed a support ship role, right, for the Rebels to kind of offset what the shuttle's doing for the Imperials, right? So we're thinking about this game coming at it from every possible way you can conceive it. Not just is, wow, is that a really cool ship? Or is it Steve's favorite ship? But how is it really going to fit into the game, right?
Steve's favorite ship in the world.
Yeah, and how is it going to affect people playing the game casually? Also, how is it going to affect people that are like coming to the regional championships, that are coming to Gen Con, right? Because if we break the competitive scene, that will have repercussions across all tiers of play, right? So when we're looking at a grouping of ships to release together, we have to think, all right, how is
how are they going to interact not only with each other, but how are they going to interact with every other ship we've already released and the ships that we're planning to release in the future, right? So it's not just, hey, let's flip a coin and that ship went over this ship. I mean, there's a lot that goes into those decisions. Sometimes some fairly heated debates that go on inside about, well, I think this ship should be here, and this ship, we have to really think these things out. We have to play test this stuff, sadly, after hours of play testing.
My first version was not perfect.
So there's a lot that goes into that, I think.
And that's another really interesting point. In terms of development, there's a concept that we call extensibility or forward compatibility, where you have to make sure that what you're building now is going to support what you're doing down the road. If the only two considerations for the core set were how are these rules working for an X-Wing and how are these rules working for a TIE Fighter, and that's all we had ever considered at the time, we could have delivered an awesome game about X-Wings and TIE Fighters. Then as soon as we tried to introduce other ships, it may just fall apart. Yes?
What are you guys doing for production and distribution fixing, where you had the main issue where Wave 2 was so delayed, kind of crashed?
One of our factories in China, and we are literally making these ships as fast as possible. They've increased their capacity to make ships, but we also had to deal with Chinese New Year, which happened in February every year, right? So that was an issue. And to be quite honest, the Millennium Falcon presented some design challenges for us, right? Not only challenges as he models a ship and did a phenomenal job doing that, but then actually taking his awesome concepts and making them a reality. The factory just found out that it was a lot harder than they thought it would be, right? And so we had a schedule and a timetable set up, and then they came back and said, well, if you really want it to look this good, it's going to turn out to take a lot more time. Well, we didn't have any choice. We had to take the time, right? I mean, as he said, we really believe that we've raised the bar on what you can do with plastics and pre-painting in this industry with these ships. And we're not going to compromise that, right? I mean,
especially with the Bull.
Yeah, especially with the most iconic ship in the whole universe, right? We're not going to do that anything less than the absolute best we could possibly do. And that was a very difficult ship to design, to manufacture. And then the knock-on effect of that is, that taking longer than we thought made everything else delayed to some point. We are starting to catch up. They have increased capacity. We are working as fast as we possibly can. The production team was just in China last month. Stuff is coming along very nicely. We're going as fast as we can.
A question that dovetails right into that, sort of two-part. Did the phenomenal success of this game catch you a little bit off guard in that respect? And two, regarding Thursday's announcement of dust tactics and that stuff is moving down to Battlefront, is that going to...
We expected this to be, I predicted it would be the most successful game we've ever done. It is the most successful game we've ever done by factors, not even percent. But it was impossible, I think, for anybody to predict the level of success we've had with this game. I mean, I was very optimistic. Some people said too optimistic, but it would have been foolish. It would have really been foolhardy and careless to predict this level of success. You can't take something like that for granted, right? I mean, there's companies that go their entire existence never seen a game that's successful. So we're very, very fortunate. And I can't comment about other businesses, but I can tell you that's not going to have any impact on the manufacturing capability.
the course set, we have that little, spread that explains how we went through the scale and the detail and the care we took in trying to make the game. And I mean, we have to decide on something that would make sense, that would feel substantive enough, while at the same time giving us enough table space, right? And making it feel like a value and everything work together. And so that's how we finalized the 1/270th scale.
Well, there's a great picture on the back that actually shows comparison of a lot of different models over the course of the development process compared to a penny. There to be able to see a lot of the different scales that have been considered before sending another one to some. A lot of factors went into that. Just know that no decision for this game was ever taken lightly.
And you notice Jason is there's a photo of Jason there.
So if you would like to have a picture of him at your desk, everything's hidden.
Yeah, that's before it had the pretty stuff on it.
Yeah, there's actually a really interesting story about the development and production of X-Wing at the back of the room. The Moldy Crow is also a very, very interesting story. And I think also, as you were doing research for it, you found that it was going to be a challenge. There were some real important decisions that had to be made.
That's an excellent question. So we worked very closely, as with all the other models, with LFL, and the Moldy Crow is the official size. It is accurate to all the other models. It is in scale with everything else. And it is 16.5 meters. That is the official measurement of the Hawk 290. And we can't comment about any other products that have been released or any fan sites and what they list. But as of the current measurement that is official with Lucasfilm, it is 16.5 meters long and is in scale to every single other ship. Yeah, we worked directly with them and looked at all the cutscenes and analyzed everything else, and it is in scale.
As of today, that is the official canon Lucasfilm response, 16.5 meters is official. That's what that is in scale.
Outside research, can you usually expect that you're going to see multiple roller ships revisited with new pilots?
So the question is, aside from Grand Oceans, are we going to see more tricks with the existing ships or previous ships and different pilots? Again, that would be speculating about future programs and other products. All I can tell you is, just like there are ships we haven't seen, who knows, the sky's the limit. There's a lot of Star Wars to explore.
What pilot do you want to see the most?
More extra pegs. Kip Durham. Extra pegs.
Yeah.
Extra what?
Pegs.
They're available in the course set, which also include extra tackles and dice. Any other questions? Yes.
A little more specific question. You may not be able to answer it, but with the upcoming Lambda shuttle, is there a way you can use that for the Rebels as well as the Imperials?
So the question is, does the Lambda shuttle work for the Rebels and the Imperials? How did we announce the shuttles or the ships?
We announced it as an Imperial ship.
Right, we announced it as an Imperial ship.
What the future holds?
Yes.
In regards to other pilots, is there potential maybe to just come out with like a pilot card and a little piece that goes on the ship instead of having another redoing the X-Wing?
That's really just a follow-up to the question that he had.
Yeah.
We can't really comment on anything.
Okay.
Yes. So the question is about, do we have a system
He's a plane tester.
designing and costing ships? Yes, we do. And it was very rigorously developed. And like I said, a lot of this also from the baseline of the core set application between one X-Wing and system type. So from that, we designed a model that we use with evaluating new ships. But that is not always the be-all end-all. Because Star Wars is not just about measurements and meters, it's about the feeling that it evokes. And especially for a game like this, TIE fighters are fragile. But if we made them too fragile, they wouldn't become play. So as with everything else, design has to be balanced with playability and funability. So they are accurate, and they reasonably represent what you could expect from them in a particular document. So a lot goes into the pricing of these ships.
What program do you use for 3D modeling?
So the question was what program for the 3D modeling? It's called SolidWorks.
And what he's not telling you is he learned that program from scratch to do this by himself.
Yes. Give him a big round of applause for this.
Do you guys produce hard copies with the models in-house for just testing a scale, or is everything through a CAD program?
We can guess all day long what it really looks like. It can look right, but until we actually print it out and put it on the table as a gift in the hand, there are certain portions you really can't see until you have it in a physical product. So yeah, with technology and 3D printing, I have been pushing that to the company for quite a while. I want to sit behind it. We print everything out for you, check it out, play with it long before you can get it out of production. So
that's also something that slows the process down too, right? I mean, to make sure that we get this stuff in exact detail, and that like ships like the Moldy Pro are at a scale that maybe people wouldn't be expecting, but is exactly right according to Lucasfilm now. The best way to do that, you can look at programs all day long on the screen, right? And he does some phenomenal stuff with that. But nothing's going to beat having it printed, putting it on a table, and then everything else.
So all your tool and dyeing is going back over to China for them to finish that with the production.
All the manufacturing is done, but we print out the kits of everything that we're doing to make sure that they look and feel right, not just from the measurement, but from looking and holding it in our own hands.
It's really awesome having 3D printing. You can play with the disc and so I do.
Are there any other questions? All right, thank you very much.